Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Daisy, your hostess, and in this video we continue on with the book titled Dominion and Power, or The Science of Life and Living by Charles Brodie Patterson. If you just found me at this video and would like to catch up with the previous chapters, please do visit my book playlist and you'll access them there. I do want to take a minute and say thank you so much for all of you who have joined this channel and for your comments. It is encouraging to find people that also have very similar interests, so thank you so very much. All right, before I get into the next chapter, I want to share my thoughts on the previous chapters. One was breath control and the other one was dependence and independence. While on the topic of breath control, I do want to share that in my book library, I do have a book by Dr. Julia Stenton titled Emanation Body, and she does touch up on the breath control and the benefits of, and also talks about different techniques. Most important, she added that the secret of old age is carbonization and the secret of youth is oxygenation. What I find interesting is that in the West, it is recently, I'm looking at these books on the turn of the century, and that's when these New Age concepts really started taking wings, so to speak, and the idea of meditation and breathing was becoming more mainstream conversation. And in the East, they've already had this down pat, the importance of meditating, the importance of, being aware of the breath and, practice good breathing techniques. So I find that pretty interesting when the secret to youth is oxygenation, really taking in, oxygen to fill in the lungs and to refresh the bloodstream. But what I also find sad was when the author wrote that the majority of the people only use 1/4 to 1/3 of the lung capacity. So I know a few people in my life that have difficulty sleeping. They use machines to sleep because they'll stop breathing during the night. So it wouldn't surprise me that, what the author said about people not breathing to the full of their lung capacity is not unusual. Like I mentioned before, when we're going through these books, sometimes it's important to just put our preconceived notions on a shelf and to have an open mind so that we can explore these possibilities. Like the whole idea that the body is a human organism, that through each pore, not only are we breathing in through and out through the nostrils or the mouth, but also through our complete being, that this is actually happening. And also the author invites us to kind of see how both our thought and our breath actually work in unison, affecting the physical atmosphere around us. So as we're inhaling, certain thoughts, that we should also exhale certain thoughts. And in fact, not only are we being uplifted, but through our thoughts and through our breath, we are creating beauty around us. We are adding an element of beauty and joy and love onto the world through our breath. And this mindfulness of our breath and our controlled breath allows us also to have a controlled mind and allowing us more function with our mental faculties. What are your thoughts on that? Let me jump over real quick then to my thoughts on dependence and independence, which was the following chapter after that one. And this one was a very interesting chapter. And it's the whole idea that, whether it's pride that we don't want to depend on others, or to understand that we should be independent and not leech off of others. It's this whole idea, and he goes into some elaborate speaking on that, but at the same time, understanding that we are all dependent on each other. I may not put it the way that the author did, but the way that I see it is to give when you need to give and to receive when someone is offering you something, and to kind of live within the law of love. And if you guide yourself by that, then it doesn't matter that you gave to this person that needed, and then this person didn't give something back to you because, you gave something to them, because somewhere down the road, when you need something, someone will be there to help you. And that's a very delicate situation, because I know that some people are like, well, I'm going to give this to you, and then they're expecting something back in return. And I don't believe that it should be that way. I do believe that there is a balance, and if we live in love and truth, then you know what? It doesn't matter who the giver and the receiver is, as long as we stand up to the call when we are needed. Well, I'm going to stop right there. I am looking forward to your comments. Please let me know that you were here. Post a comment. Sit back and enjoy as I turn the page. Chapter 6, Psychic Development. A quote by Gospel of Buddha. Said the Blessed One, "Verily I say unto you, your mind is mental, but that which you perceive with your senses is also mental. There is nothing within the world or without which either is not mind or cannot become mind. There is a spirituality in all existence, and the very clay upon which we tread can be changed into children of truth." End of quote. Man is, in a sense, related to two worlds. On one side, the world of form, a world of effect, and on the other side, the world of the invisible, a world of cause. In reality, we are living in two worlds, a world of the seen and a world of the unseen. A word of explanation is perhaps necessary at this point. There are not two distinct and separate worlds, but two phases, I might say, of one world. We must get this distinction clear in mind of two states of consciousness in life, an inner and an outer. Some people live almost exclusively in the outer. Some people live to a marked degree in the inner world. The people of our own country use concentration of mind to make their work effective in the outer world. The people in India and in some other countries use meditation to such a marked degree that they live very little in the so-called physical world. Their desires and hopes are not placed in the physical, but rather in the unseen world. As I have explained before, it is only as we learn to live in both worlds, or in these two phases of life, and keep the mind thoroughly balanced between the two, that we become rounded out, that we become developed. We all know then a great deal about the physical side of life, but comparatively few people know much about the psychic side of life, and only in an abnormal way, because the majority of the cases of so-called psychic development are brought about in an abnormal rather than in a normal way. The trouble with people is that they develop this psychic side of life without understanding the law that lies back of all development. They do not know how to use the development that comes to them, and usually put it to a wrong use. Again, many people seem to think that certain phases of abnormal psychic development correspond to, or rather are in reality, spiritual gifts of a higher order, when just the reverse of this is true. A great many people who believe in what they term the invisible world are in reality living a more materialistic life than the people who know little, if anything, about an invisible world. Even the investigators of psychic phenomena seem to lose sight of the one great side of this whole question, the spiritual development of man, and they would seek to apply exactly the same law, the same processes of reaching satisfactory conclusions that they would in any other thing, and it is a curious fact that they are most interested in abnormal than in normal psychic development. But everything is changed here in this realm of the psychic, and we are not going to be able to apply the same tests that have been used in the outer world. We are getting nearer to the causes of things. In the outer world, we have been dealing exclusively with effects. It is always well to remember that until recently, at least, science has had to do with effects. Science seldom at any point comes into real contact with causes. That is, that every scientific fact is a fact concerning the things of the outer and not the things of the inner. When we approach the inner side of life, we must look at things from a different point of view. In fact, if we are going to investigate the spiritual, we must do it with the spiritually enlightened mind. There is no other way. Many people confound physical development with occultism, and it is not unnatural that this mistake should occur, as both pertain to secret and unseen things. We must learn, however, to distinguish between the two. Webster defines the word psychical of or pertaining to the human soul relating to the living principle in man. He defines the word development, the act of developing or disclosing that which is unknown, the gradual advancement of growth through a series of progressive changes. In other words, psychical development is unfolding to the spiritual possibilities latent within us, while occultism pertains more to a knowledge of the unseen forces external to the soul. It is possible to have a knowledge of occult things without being highly developed spiritually, but it is not possible to be highly developed psychically without possessing knowledge equal to and surpassing the knowledge of the occultist. Those who seek to attain to an understanding of occult laws without first being spiritually awakened are playing with two-edged tools, and no possible gain can accrue to them, but rather loss from such study. Curiosity and love for things uncanny prompt some to investigate this subject, with the result that not a few become mentally unbalanced thereby. Knowledge of unseen forces come to us naturally when we have progressed to a state where we are neither affrighted nor disturbed by the phenomena we are brought into contact with. Leaving then the subject of occultism, we will turn our attention to psychical development. In order to make the greatest progress in this direction, it will be found necessary to cultivate all the faculties of mind. By so doing, we will succeed in controlling the animal nature. First of all, strongly desire tranquility and restfulness of mind, in order that truth may mirror or image itself in mind. Firmness is another quality that all should seek to possess. When mind mirrors the truth, firmness is necessary to hold it against all temptation that may appeal to us from any quarter. Forgiveness is also needful. Do not hope to attain to true knowledge of spiritual things when your mind is embittered or your heart hardened against anyone who may have injured or wronged you in any way. By so doing, you bar your way to the true unfolding. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven. Abstain from theft. Many people who think themselves far above stealing are baser thieves than those who steal our money. The person who slanders or speaks falsely of another is a worse thief by far than one who steals our material possessions. If you are unable to see and speak of the good in others, then do not defile your mouth by speaking evil of them, for by so doing, you descend to a plane where darkness enslaves the mind. There are still other forms of stealing of which we must beware. The getting of illicit gain, perhaps money or worldly possessions without giving an equivalent in return. The taking of exorbitant interest, thus profiting by others' necessities. Purity of thought is another qualification to the one who would become spiritually unfolded. Allow the mind to dwell on all that is pure and beautiful. Word and deed will then respond to this renewed mental condition. Control your passions. Do not let them control you. Many find this more difficult than all else, but repeated failures should only make us desire more ardently to attain to true self-control. Veracity is another necessary quality. There are many ways of lying. Some people look upon certain forms of lying as an accomplishment, and it is needless to enumerate, or to try to enumerate, the various ways and methods of lying. Freedom from hatred and wrath becomes absolutely necessary before we can attain to soul knowledge. When we are angry or hate others, our minds are like the sea lashed by the tempest. No rest, no peace, tossed to and fro. Oh, that we might realize the necessity of calming this storm-tossed sea, allowing the still small voice in all gentleness, yet in all firmness, to speak the words, "Peace, be still." Greatest of all is the knowledge acquired through the intuitive faculties. Do not be deceived by thinking that all knowledge must come through the intellect. The court of last resort is the intuitive side of your being. People who have cultivated only the intellectual way may disagree with this statement, but their arguments are of no avail to those who have developed the intuitive part of their being. It is not a question of belief to the persons thus unfolded, but one of knowledge. They know whereof they speak. In order, therefore, to unfold intuitively, we must practice self-control. We may think it to be an everyday virtue, but the fact is, few people have any idea what self-control means. It means far more than the mere control of our words and passions. It means more than denying ourselves earthly pleasures. It means to control our every thought. Self-control involves concentration of mind, and through it only can true concentration be acquired. This is the law. In no other way can we become psychically developed, although it is true that certain kinds of abnormal development can be acquired in other ways. It is possible to learn concentration of mind by looking intently at a black spot on the wall. It may be possible to develop clairvoyance by mirror gazing, but the concentration and clairvoyance thus acquired are only counterfeits of the real. No true lasting progress can come through the development of our hidden powers when, by so doing, we shut out the light of spirituality in the soul. There is also more or less danger to the one so engaged. We must understand the uses of the different powers we develop. Otherwise, we shall not know the true use to make of them. And how can we know the use of powers which we have abnormally developed? It is always well to bear in mind that the greater the knowledge or power we possess, the greater evil it becomes to ourselves and others when put to a wrong or perverted use. The greatest good, when perverted, becomes the greatest evil. True spiritual power may seem more difficult to acquire than some other things, but when once acquired, it will never leave you. It will ever prove a source of strength and peace, while the false development, in the end, will surely prove a source of unrest and weakness. A pure and unselfish life will do more to fit you to become possessed of spiritual powers than all the study of magic, occultism, of clairvoyance could ever do. Many people believe that in mediumship, there's something of a spiritual nature. There is nothing spiritual about it. It is simply hypnotism transferred to another plane where the medium's mind becomes subject to the mind of another. Because the person who impresses the mind of the medium has passed out of this body into the invisible, that does not make that person a spiritual being. If a man goes out of this world a liar, he must remain a liar until through his own effort he becomes truthful. Whatever we have in mind when we go out of this world, we take with us. A great many people believe that when they pass out of this world, they're going to a beautiful heaven. And if they have this heaven in their consciousness, when they pass out, their dreams will be realized. But if we have it not, and should find themselves in a beautiful heaven, they would be out of place and in no way adjusted to it. It is necessary to take this into consideration. Mesmerism has been called the key to occult sciences, but beware of the key. Have nothing to do with it. God never intended that one soul should control another. Freedom is written in every law of nature. Only through freedom of will can man hope to attain to higher planes of existence. Again, there is the violation of the law of God when one soul relinquishes its right to think and act to any other soul. This violation of law has been going on for hundreds of years. Ministers have thought for people. They have worked out for people the way of salvation. That is, these people thought that ministers were doing this, but they never did. They have only to work out their own salvation. If they are doing that, they are doing all that God requires of them. Every man must work out his own salvation. While an enlightened man may throw light on the way of life, each one must walk that way for himself. Whatever thwarts or interferes with individual liberty retards soul growth. Man's freedom of will consists not in obeying the dictates of the lower mind, the selfish desires, but in the perfect obedience to the law of God, which is written into his own being. The renunciation of selfishness is ever followed by spiritual growth. It is through divesting the mind of its purely personal self, attaching no importance to personal feelings and things, and seeking to realize the higher selfhood, that true individuality is attained, which will continue to last when this purely personal self has vanished away. A belief in personality chokes out all that is true and noble, and in its place spring up thorns and briars. Sense and intellectual natures are both focused on personality and seek to obtain pleasures and happiness at the expense of other souls. Flee from this false sense of things. Happiness is not attained in this way. No harmony of mind can come to the individual who dwells in this false thought of personality. The kingdom of heaven is harmony, power, peace, wisdom, and these things are born of something higher. The love of the good, not of a part, but of the whole. The recognition of the indwelling of God, not alone in our souls, but in the soul of the universe. We are members one of another. An invisible union exists between us, which we now fail to perceive, owing to our wrong conceptions concerning the personal man. We talk of the oneness of life and intelligence, but do we realize what this means and how much it means? Oh, that we might, for such realization would awaken in the soul of man a higher, truer, and a purer love than he has ever known before. Instead of the narrow love of self, love of family, friends, or nation, the soul would overflow with boundless love, not limited, but limitless. And as that love takes possession and reign in our hearts and souls, we shall find this to be true, that we love not family, friend, or nation less, but through loving the whole, we become more capable of loving each part of the whole. We become one with the whole. And there is this entering into the universal, becoming one with might, becoming one with power, becoming one with the intelligence of God. Out of this condition of life come all minor conditions. Comes the psychic development, this ability to see just as clearly in what is called the invisible world as in the visible world, to hear in the invisible just as much as to hear people speaking in this visible world. One enters into a new consciousness of life. One realizes for the first time that this outer world is not the all-important world that we make it. One is no longer influenced, no longer controlled by external things. He realizes that he is superior in every sense of the word to all the external, that the soul of man is greater than the world, that man has dominion and power over every external thing. The soul is superior to it all. The soul makes all true conditions of life, whether they be inner or outer. Do not let us deceive ourselves about these things. It is easy to be deceived. People can so locate authority in the outer world that until there comes the spiritual awakening, the whole life will be guided by the external, and they will never live, and never can, the life that man was intended to live. Remember that the truth shall make you free. Then shall ye be freed indeed. Jesus said, "He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it." In order to live on a higher plane of existence, we must die to a knowledge of the personal self instead of perpetuating it through the gratification of purely personal desires. The caterpillar dies that the butterfly may live. The personal man must cease to be before the soul can become fully alive to the spiritual man. Death is but dying to one state that we may live in another. When we die to the sense nature, we shall awaken to the physical. The mind of man has been so engaged in the study of the visible world about him that to a marked degree he has overlooked the invisible forces both within and without. We have reached an epoch in the world's history where many are turning away from the study of the seen, where the mind, having wearied from oft-repeated endeavors to find the solution of life in the world of form, is turning to a study of the unseen. Evolution in itself can never disclose to our vision the spiritual realities of the universe. We must go back of all existing forms to arrive at eternal verities. We must see beyond the world of effects because all causation lies within the realm of the unseen. Medical men study the pathology of the body, and there are mental healers who study the pathology of the mind. It is barely possible that they are both necessary states of evolution, but they are only necessary to those having no higher knowledge of the truth. A study of pathology of either mind or body is but going down into the shadows, the dwelling in things that contradict the good and the true. If we would carry light to souls who sit in darkness, we must dwell in the light ourselves. If we are groping about in the shadows involved in the contradictories of truth, how is it to be expected that our light will become manifest to them? In order to reach and be beneficial to other souls, we must have a recognition of the possibilities inherent within them. And how can we have such a recognition if we ourselves have not unfolded to the possibilities of the power and goodness that is contained potentially within our own being? The study of truth, beginning in the deepest recesses of our own consciousness, making it itself first manifest to ourselves, will eventually become manifest to those about us. We can never discover or throw light on the way that leads to life for another until we have first made that discovery for ourselves. The goodness that we see in others, we see only in proportion as we have unfolded to a knowledge of goodness in our own souls. The seeming evil, the lack of truth that we see in others, is but, after all, evil and lack of truth in ourselves. Of course, we would express in our own way the goodness or lack of goodness we see in others. No two persons express things exactly alike. While one person may judge and condemn another for what he considers pride, for instance, if he makes a thorough examination of himself, he will find the same quality of mind, or rather lack of quality, expressing itself in other ways in exactly the same proportion. The yardstick by which we measure other people is the only one that we can use in measuring ourselves. We can, therefore, see the necessity of finding the good and the true within our own consciousness in order that we may judge righteously. If we could thoroughly understand the lights and shades of our own being, it would not be possible for us to condemn or sit in judgment of any other soul. It is not as though there were many ways that souls could take to reach a more perfect state of being, so that there might be differences of opinion as to the better way to take. The way that one soul treads in its unfolding is the way that all souls must tread. When Jesus said that the way was a straight and narrow one, he also added, "And few there be that find it." He did not mean to imply that the way would not eventually be found, but simply means that the minds of those about him were so taken up with thoughts of this world, its cares and its pleasures, that their eyes were blinded to the true way. In other words, that the great majority of mankind was bent on seeking pleasures and happiness in the world without them, while few were seeking it in kingdom that lies within. We stand today on the very threshold of spiritual knowledge and its consequent power, knowledge that surpasses any that the world can offer, power that pertains not to things of this world, but to our own spiritual well-being. Self is the barrier that stands in the doorway and bars our entrance. He who enters that doorway leaves self behind. Human will must accord with divine will. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. The indwelling Christ would point the way of life. That Christ is seeking to attain the ascendancy in the hearts and minds of all people, and yet we turn away. We are not ready to forego the pleasures of the world for the peace that the world cannot give, nor yet take away. We are blind about many things now. Sometime we will see clearly. The spiritual senses have been hid, covered up by the physical. When we have subordinated the lower self to the higher will, then will joy and peace and rest flow into our lives, and the things that have been hidden will be revealed. The love of God and the love of man will then become a living spring, flowing through our thoughts and words and deeds, blessing everyone, throwing a light upon the path of life that will enable others to more clearly discern the way that leads to everlasting day. End of chapter 6. Stay right here. I'm going to flip the page to the next chapter, chapter 7, titled Self-Expression. Please do hit that like button. Self-expression. Quote by Channing. Every human being is intended to have a character of his own, to be what no other is, and to do what no other can. End quote. A quote by Phillips Brooks. The poor, exiled shrub dreams by a native longing of a splendid blossom which it has never seen, but is dimly conscious that it ought somehow to produce. This is the way in which the ideal of life, the life of full completion, haunts us all. We feel the thing we ought to be beating beneath the thing we are. End quote. Another quote by Phillips Brooks. God hides some ideal in every human soul. At some time in our life, we feel a trembling, fearful longing to do some good thing. Life finds its noblest spring of excellence in this hidden impulse to do our best. End quote. A New Testament writer reminds us of the diversity of gifts possessed. One has that of healing, another prophecy, another tongues. All are expressions of the same Spirit, but in the unity of the Spirit, there is a wide difference of expression. The same informing Spirit may even express itself in two opposite extremes, and yet there be perfect unity in the inner force thus outworking. There must of necessity be this variety in the forms it takes and in their operation. It is of this ultimate expression that we, as builders, decide the form. The informing force is not ours. This is the gift. How we use this gift lies with ourselves, and the gift is really ours only through the true using. And this using of our gift or gifts should be in accordance with our deepest desires. The desire of the inmost self is the guide to all true effort, activity, expression. That which we truly desire, upon which we earnestly fix and center our minds, comes of necessity, naturally and freely into this life. With the inception of any strong, true desire, we come into the real possession of the thing desired. Possession is not a matter of some future time, nor even of material expression. The latter belongs to the outward realization only. Someone may say, "This sounds very well indeed, but it is impossible for me to see the truth of it." Each thing actualized must first exist as an updwelling desire, a mental image, before it can be expressed, externalized. Now, This updwelling force, this primal feeling, is involuntary. The pictured plan of its outworking is of our making and direction, and the final product is wholly in our hands. We make our own pictures of life. If we make no pictures, have no plans in our life activities, this essential force is practically wasted, frittered away. We drift on the great ocean of existence. Our minds go from one desire to another and accomplish nothing. We are like ships without a rudder. We may be intact in equipment otherwise, but if we have nothing to guide us, nothing of service will be achieved. We need a chart for our voyage. We need to know the purpose of our lives, each for himself, to know the goal of expression for himself. None can interpret or decide for another. Each must work out his own salvation. Success in anything can never come through merely wishing or hoping or thinking or taking treatments for success. Any of these may serve as a stimulus, but anything worth the having must be steadfastly worked for. It does not come to folded hands. Our life plan need not be a hard and fast one. It should be adjustable, growing with the added knowledge and new experiences of each day. We do not cast aside yesterday's chart, but enlarge it in keeping with today's horizon. One of the greatest mistakes in life is that of taking for granted that the thoughts and feelings, the conceptions and ideals that bring us happiness today will satisfy us tomorrow. We hold tenaciously to the old ideals and forms of expression and try to revivify them to meet the demands of the moment. There is such a thing as divine discontent, a constant hungering and thirsting after fuller expression, larger life, deeper realization. But this is as different as day is from night, from the futile, feverish dissatisfaction that finds no pleasure in the present, yet makes no effort to actualize the larger ideal. To the divine discontent, the soul's outreaching, the life more abundant is the unfailing response. All expression comes through activity. Through repose and relaxation come the gathering together of the life forces and the accumulation of energy and strength. This, however, must alternate with activity, else the accumulation is of no service, is really injurious. The active life is essential to health on every plane, and is the truly religious life. Isolation from one's fellows, a life of separateness, pondering perhaps over some sacred book or revered truth, can never be the most deeply religious life, for it is not the natural life. Not the monk who shuts himself off from the world to save his own soul, but the man who is acquainted with the joys as well as the griefs of the common people, who lives the common everyday life, the simple, natural life, is the ideal we need today. Man works as God works. The pressure of energy he feels within him is from the source of his being, from God. We must follow out our own way, our own deepest desire and impulse. We must not imitate or blindly follow, for in this way we destroy the particular message which we came into the world to give. Each of us can do one thing best, and this is the thing for us to do. This does not mean that we are not to listen to counsel, but after all is said and done, the self, the innermost, must finally decide. The one who gives advice offers the best he knows, the best for him. But what is best for one is not by any means the best for another. What do you want most to be or to do? That is the question. What is your deepest desire? To make the outer like the inner. This is what we are all, consciously or unconsciously, striving for. We shall not succeed all at once. We cannot build the whole structure in a moment. Shall we, then, yield to the disappointment and discouragement? We have tried so hard and so long, hoped for so much and accomplished so little. There is no room for discouragement in this life. Take a broader, deeper view of it, and all is clear, and every step is seen to be an outward step. That life is worse than wasted which has not unfolded, expressed. No matter how full of possessions, of material things, and of power the span of life may be, it is empty, nevertheless, if the true self has not expressed itself. We may travel up and down the earth and search all the wisdom of the past, but if we have not found ourselves, we are forever unsatisfied. We must come to know the innermost. We must be at home at the center of our being. This demand is written indelibly in the constitution of all things. And this we can do only through work. I use the word in the broadest sense. Just as there is no enjoyment of food on the physical plane without the requisite amount of exercise, so on every other plane, activity is essential to growth and development. When we are active, each doing his own work, there is a sense of completeness, of fitness, of buoyancy. There is the keen functionary satisfaction that marks the square man in the square hole, the final and unquestionable proof that we are doing the right thing in the right place. There can be no true harmony in the life until we have found our work, until we are doing our work. If we fail to express what is within us, demanding unfoldment, we are like dead bodies walking about, mere encumberers of the ground. We can realize the joy of living only through work, through self-expression. Mere inactivity is not rest. Rest ceases to be restful when the balance is lost and the activity is not in proportion. There must be this balance, this poise. Nature resents every excess. If at one time we do 2 days' work in one day, we will presently have to take 2 days to do 1 day's work. As we work steadily and earnestly, doing each thing that comes to hand according to our best light at the moment, we find a corresponding increase of power. The greatest development comes through the well-doing of each duty, however apparently insignificant. The thing we know best how to do is usually the thing that needs to be done by us. We should strive to get a good perspective in our work, to take a broad and all-around view of life. As we, one by one, dispense with the useless superficial things of our day-by-day life, as the needless tension and strain relaxes, when we begin to live simply, earnestly, naturally, we will find our power increased tenfold. We can accomplish then many times what we formerly could. We can dispatch things with greater speed and yet without hurry. When the mind is poised and the purpose kept constantly and clearly in view, action follows action in orderly sequence. There is no haste, yet no wasted effort or time. One may run, with poise and even quietness when another, walking, may be in haste and turmoil of spirit. Notice in playing the piano, there must be rapid movement, but it must also be orderly, measured, purposeful. To the purposeless mind, the presentation of 2 or 3 things to be done at one time produces confusion. In the purposeful mind, there is no reason for confusion. Each new thing falls naturally into its place, and there is neither waste nor haste. If one lives out his own life sincerely, there's always a place for him in the world. He cannot be superfluous. The world needs each of us, else we would not be here. Each has a natural individual message. Of a dozen singers, for instance, there are no 2 just alike, though all perhaps may have the same register. Wherever there is life, there is diversity of expression, just as there are no 2 leaves alike among all the leaves on all the trees the world over. So there is never repetition in unfolding life. So too in our work. Insofar as we give ourselves to it, it lives and is of service. We weave ourselves, our very souls, into whatever work we do sincerely. Now, an imitation, it is different. No matter how perfect a copy is, it can never carry any special message. It does not live. It is well to learn of others, but only to the end that we the more completely express ourselves. Work often comes to us to be done. It seems to stand before us directly in our way when we would go elsewhere and do other things. Now, when this happens, it is well to do the thing that presents itself. Do it well, the best we can. We may not want to go on doing it forever, but the quickest way to get rid of it, to grow out of it into the way of our desires, is to face it and give it our best effort until the especial lesson that it holds for us is learned. We can never shirk or pass over things, however difficult or unwelcome they may seem, and often enough they prove angels in disguise. The clearer we keep our minds and the healthier our bodies are, the better work we will do in whatever line we may choose. We owe this to ourselves, to our fellow man, to God. This is our reasonable service, to present our bodies whole and acceptable unto God. It is so much easier to be healthy and wholesome-minded and happy than the reverse, if only we would think so. It is the natural way. Heretofore, we have thought so much of our weaknesses and failures. We have dwelt at such a length on our discouragements and difficulties. And of course, the result was more difficulty and more failure. Now let us try the other way. Let us try a complete reversal of action. Let us remember that the power that is in us, working through us, is all health and all strength and all happiness. There is no obstacle or hindrance to the full free expression of this power except our own wills, our own desires or lack of desire. Remember, nothing presents itself to us to be done that is too difficult for us to accomplish. No desire can come to us that is too high or too great for fulfillment. If anything comes to us that does not really belong to us, it will not stay, whether it be possessions or experience or whatever it may be. But we must work, nevertheless, for the keeping of even our own. A healer may give his very life to a patient, but if the patient puts forth no effort of his own, it will be of no permanent good. We must do our own work, live our own lives, make our own decisions. No other man or any number of men, not God himself, will do this for us. Work, in its broadest, its true sense, is the most essential thing in life. Take work out of life, and there is, in reality, nothing left. No interest, no purpose, no joy. All work should be the expression of one's real self. The kingdom of God can come on earth only as each individual finds his own salvation through work and brings it in this way. There is no soul exempt from this responsibility. The question comes to each of us now. Am I consciously endeavoring to unfold to the plan of life which God has written into my soul, to be true to the purest, the holiest, the highest instincts of my being? Am I trying to help others to be true to themselves? Do I desire happiness for others as earnestly as I desire it for myself? For it is only in this way that I must eventually work out my own salvation, and in so doing, help to bring the kingdom of God on earth. End of chapter. All right, if you haven't done so, please do hit that like button, and let's go to the next video where we will continue with this book titled The Science of Life and Living, Dominion and Power by Charles Brodie Patterson.